The other big news story this week from an education point of view was the news that the UAE, the government, has opened 11 new schools. They've launched this academic year. It's not a small situation here. There's space for 28,000 pupils in these schools. They're at the heart of a major drive to boost public education standards nationwide. They have things like cutting-edge laboratories. They've got sports facilities, art facilities. They're massive. They're 4 times the size of a typical public school based on capacity. There's also lots of green spaces and smart tech to ensure that they're sustainable. So we sort of just got thinking, we heard about these 11 new schools. We heard that they were really special. And it sort of got us thinking about, how school architecture has moved on. What is cutting edge school design? So we got in touch with Jason Burnside. He's an architect and partner with Godwin Austin Johnson. He specialises in designing educational buildings. He's designed many of the UAE's most famous schools. I won't tell you each one, but you've heard of all of them. And so I started by asking him about essentially how school design has changed over the years and in fact, whether it has changed.
Education design is really coming into its own. And I think probably if you had asked the question a decade or 2 decades ago, there would have been the idea that schools should be different, but they probably would fit a traditional mold that most of us would remember, which was long, lifeless corridors with rooms off it, bad acoustics, bad lighting. But now those days are long gone. And I think that coming out of COVID, school design has moved even further ahead in the last 3 or 4 years, where we're really starting to look at schools now to provide flexibility so that areas of the school can be used as additional space. So if we had to separate the density of the school out and move into breakout spaces, school developers now are looking at what used to be maybe considered wasted space before, now is actually very valuable teaching space. But the philosophy behind school design, I think, has also changed massively, where the student really is at the heart of everything, as it should be. But I think that you tend to sometimes forget that, and you see a school as just being somewhere to go and learn. But, if a child is not engaged in the learning environment, then you have to question, are they really passionate about being there, and what are they getting out of it other than going through the motions? You add that all together and you really have to have something now that is much more holistic, much more human-centric.
So a lot less utilitarian, maybe more green spaces, both in and outside the school, more bright colours, different surfaces, different textures, all of that type of thing.
I think largely you're correct. I mean, I think looking at environments now where recognizing that, we are all individual and therefore our needs are much more personal to us. But in a day and age where social media plays a big part in a student's life, whether that's right or wrong, it's not for us to debate now. But I think that you need to understand that students now react very differently with each other. And therefore finding spaces where students can feel that they are able to go and disconnect and recharge, and whether that's just go and find a corner and sit with your friends, read a book, talk, or even just to be able to charge your phone and be in the company of other people brings a huge amount of comfort to them. So thinking about it from a social aspect is very important. I think in terms of the point that I raised earlier, which is sustainability, I think that there is a place, obviously, now for much more natural materials in school design, because we have access to so many more fabulous materials, but bringing those in a way that kind of harmonizes with the overall feeling of the school. And as designers, we would always advocate that if we can have natural daylight, if we can have, where possible, access to outdoor spaces easily accessible by all students, there is a huge well-being aspect to that. Our latest design that we've done for a school in Dubai has a theme of biophilia, which is this connection with nature, which sits right at the heart of that building. And the whole development, the organization of the library, the classrooms, the cafe, is all revolving around one large internal garden. And the real conscious attempt there was to connect the students both inside and out with nature, but also so that it would provide, a calming effect throughout the day, but also a focal point where we are using it to have a space that we call the gazebo, for example, which is a communal gathering space in amongst the trees within the internal garden, to try and provide, as I said, a range of spaces from single individual study pods all the way up to maybe a group half class size of maybe say 12, 13 students, sitting in a collaborative environment. And it was really then to do with breaking down the barriers between traditional teaching spaces of a classroom with one door in and out to much greater transparency, but also the blurring of the edges of what really is a teaching space and what is a social space, so that the students have access to learning in ways that are probably maybe new to some of them, but actually probably more familiar to how they learn when they're at home, where they might start their homework in the living room and end up finishing it in their bedroom. So they're used to being in much more dynamic scenarios than we give them credit for. So therefore, why not try to replicate that now in some of the school designs?
So we got in touch with Jason Burnside. He's a senior architect. He's the partner at Godwin Austin Johnson. He actually specialises in education. And he told us that technology and its use in the classroom is playing an increasing influence on how schools are designed.
So a lot of probably the stuff that you don't actually see, which is all of the cabling and the networking, schools are really having to invest quite heavily now to make sure that that is always there as a backbone to another situation where you would have to work remotely, or actually in improving the quality of the speed within the building. And we look at that very early in the design process. Along with that, phones are not great. We know that as parents, but actually they're a very useful tool in connecting people back to a place that they belong in. And if there's a building that they can go and hang out in and feel cool in, well, why not? You know, that's what they get when they go to their coffee shops to study outside of school. Why not make it available again when they're in school?
How about the idea that the school should have a certain grandeur, a certain sort of status, so that the pupils sort of feel a sense of pride in their school, a sense that they're going to an important place?
It's definitely something that you probably find in this region, where everyone is trying to compete in quite a tough market in terms of we have a lot of fantastic schools here. They're all trying to offer something different because they all want to attract the best students, and I think that if you can, in a way, use that as a trigger for the students to be able to buy into the ethos of the school, then architecture can play a big role in that for sure. But I think that needs to be aligned, as you say, with a sense of pride that they really enjoy being part of that school, which then comes down to to the teaching, to the teachers, to the philosophy of the school. And as designers, when we interact with these clients, we often find that they are very, very passionate about what they're trying to do as an educational establishment. And therefore, it makes our job much easier in a way to start to introduce a little bit of that competitive edge through the graphic design, reinforcing the logo or reinforcing house colors. And that can give a real sense of place and belonging to the students. So again, inter-school rivalries or inter-house rivalries within the school really then drives and motivates that teamwork and collaboration.
My final question is about the sustainability of schools. Children are more aware of the need to be eco-friendly than I think even adults are in many ways. Is it possible to make schools, buildings, eco-friendly on every level, right from the materials you use to the amount of power they get through each day?
Absolutely, 100%. We would be huge advocates and supporters of any school operator or client, looking to invest into sustainability, because it is initially that it is an investment. You do not get to reap the benefits if there is not some initial investment. So as a practice, we've delivered now 4 LEED Gold schools. Recently, Ladybird Nursery just been awarded the 4th highest scoring early learning center outside of the US. So it was a huge accolade for us and for that particular client to get. But the benefit in that is that hopefully in the life cycle of that building there will be huge energy savings, and therefore that initial investment gets repaid time and time again. As a piece of marketing, I suppose parents knowing that their young child is going into a building that is sustainable, that is eco-friendly, means that the materials that they come into contact with have all been certified. And that gives, I think, a huge sense of confidence in that you are in a very healthy building For us, on top of that, we would also look to make sure that, as I said, it's not just about the materials or the systems within the building, but that the feeling of the building and therefore that well-being aspect, the connections with nature and the kind of blurring of the inside to the outside. So again, students can have that connection with nature and well-being. We would always try to ensure that every school that we design has some key element to it that really helps it focus on sustainability as a big part of that building.